Hey everyone, welcome back to Observe. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing the nonverbal communication of two different people in relation to Jeffrey Dahmer. And that would be his parents, Joyce and Lionel. More on that in just a second. Let's go ahead and roll the intro. Okay, so with the release of the recent Netflix series on Dahmer, there have been an uptick in requests centered around his life, both himself and the people that are involved in his life. Today, we're going to be looking at his parents specifically to see what sort of indicators there may have been as to what led to Jeffrey Dahmer in and of himself. This is my third video in the Dahmer series, so to speak. If you would like to watch the other two, they are listed in the description of this video. One of them is centered around Jeffrey Dahmer himself, then one around Lionel and that relationship there. And now we're having a comparison of two recollections of how the pregnancy of Jeffrey Dahmer really played out. And so they're very different recollections of it, and I find that very fascinating, especially because of the implications thereof. So we'll take a look at that. And if there are more questions that you have or more interviews that you would like me to look at, especially there's one where Lionel and Jeffrey both are sitting down together. If you want me to take a look at that sort of interview, just let me know in the description of this video. However, for now, let's go ahead and just start watching this one. It's going to start off with Lionel and how he recollects the birth and how he recollects the entire pregnancy, and then it'll switch over and we'll watch Joyce's side as well. Let's go ahead and do that.
In his endless second guessing about the upbringing of his child, there is one last agonizing possibility that haunts Lionel Dahmer. That the drugs he says were prescribed for his wife when she was pregnant with Jeffrey might have harmed him. Lionel remembers a very difficult pregnancy.
Her jaw would go sideways and lock, and her eyes would bulge. And I know it sort of sounds like epilepsy.
It does sound like a seizure of some kind.
Right. But it was not diagnosed as that. The doctor did not say that that's what it was. He did not know what it was.
Okay, so this is kind of the two different narratives that we're going to be working with here. Is this side from Lionel saying that perhaps the medications that the mother was on caused some of these difficulties, and as he's going through and recollecting all of these things, there's not too much that's varying from his baseline. He hasn't had any spikes in his tone or pitch or anything along those lines on the auditory side, and then along with that, we haven't seen anything stray from his casual baseline as well as we've seen him talking. I will note, however, that there are some interesting verbal patterns that he's using here to where he's specifically saying that he's found this solution more or less. He's like, I know that this sounds like epilepsy, which he describes a scenario and then immediately offers a solution of what it possibly could be. And then he then says that the doctor didn't describe it as that. He'd said that it was not that. And it's very specific with his wording. It sounds interesting that he's really, really trying to hang it on this specific area, and very, very intensely so. And so that I do find interesting. I'm really curious as to why he's really hammering home that the doctor didn't diagnose it specifically as epilepsy. I'm just curious. Just a verbal red flag, but we're going to continue watching.
He did not know what it was. A doctor would usually have to intervene, giving Joyce injections of barbiturates and morphine, which would finally relax her.
While current medical literature says barbiturates taken during pregnancy can cause fetal damage, at Jeffrey's trial, experts said it was impossible to link his criminal behavior to the prescription drugs his mother may have taken during her pregnancy.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause that. So that's kind of what Lionel's side of this is that, oh, this could be the possibility of it. Now, what I have difficulty with is that there are some areas where it seems as though it is rather gray, that he doesn't know what was really going on, and it is going to turn soon into a he said, she said sort of situation. But the fact that it was also discovered that there's just not really a possibility of the medicines causing that sort of issue, then that should have been a good enough indication for that specific avenue to be dropped. And if it hadn't been dropped yet, if it had been disproven and still had not been dropped, then that means that there's something else that's behind there that's really keeping it in there for Lionel. Perhaps there's some form of disagreement within the marriage or something along those lines, to where even though he's being told that it's not an actual possibility, he's still holding on to it with such force and passion. So I do find that interesting. A little bit of a red flag on that side of things. Let's continue watching and we'll see kind of how Joyce's goes.
Pregnancy. And tests showed no brain or genetic abnormalities. When we asked Joyce about her pregnancy, she disputed much of what Lionel said had happened and told us she doesn't know why he continues to raise questions about it, unless it's to blame her.
There were no seizures. I can't imagine where that comes from. It isn't true. I don't...
You don't recall anything like that?
No.
Seizures or
No.
seizure-like episodes?
Absolutely not.
Is it
Okay, so now I'm going to make some notes about what I'm seeing non-verbally from Joyce. It looks like she has had some freezing of her facial muscles here and there, so that's going to make it a little bit more difficult to see some of the micro-expressions that might creep in, especially in and around the eyes and the cheeks and nose area. So like in this area here where there can be some action being seen for various emotional tells, that's going to be fairly absent. That'll make it a little bit muddier to work with, to be sure. So then along with that, we're hearing now that she has fully denied every form of physical difficulty in realms of seizures, and that does distinctly go against what Lionel had said earlier. And with Lionel's, he does bring up the aspects of, well, the medical side of things, but even in that, there was some suspicious verbal behavior around that medical side of things. And now Joyce is saying that that absolutely did not happen. So we're really going to have to try to hone in here to see if there are any contradictions in various areas, to see which aspect might be more authentic. And chances are there will probably be some aspects of both that are authentic, because that's usually where the truth ends up lying, somewhere in the in-between. But let's just see how this plays out real quick first.
Is it possible you just don't remember them, Joyce?
No, it's not possible. I don't remember them. It was my first pregnancy. I remember everything about my first pregnancy.
Were you prescribed medications, including morphine, barbiturates?
I don't know what medications were prescribed, and
Okay, so this is where it does get a little bit interesting, because Joyce brings up a very good point. First pregnancy is a very important, monumental time in a person's life, pretty heavy in a person's memory, would stick there pretty well. So with them being like, no, I would remember these things, that is fairly true. That you would expect that and feel that to be true. Along with that, we're seeing a little bit of aggression come in with that increase in pitch and tone and force behind their words, as well as they're defending this aspect fairly steadily. And then right after that, though, once it's brought up with the medication side of things, okay, but then you were on these sorts of medications, she does also immediately say, well, I don't know what those were. So she in kind of the same flow of phrasing here went from I remember everything throughout the pregnancy to I don't remember what medications were during the pregnancy. They were just given and I was prescribed and I took. It is still a possibility for sure. Like there is that possibility that maybe she just really didn't care what medicines she was taking or keep track of them and just trusted the doctor to give and take whatever. So that is that possibility, but it does kind of seem interesting that within one sentence, one phrase, one thought pattern there, it does have a switch of I remember everything to no, I don't remember the medications. That is at least a red flag. So now we have a couple red flags for both sides. Let's continue watching.
And I had a doctor, a physician. I took the medicine that was prescribed for me, and for the most part I was healthy. There was nothing that was out of the ordinary as far as my pregnancy was concerned, except that.
Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and pause. It sounds like there's gonna be a qualifier added here. But she said, and I was healthy for the most part, and rushes by it right on to the next part. So that is a red flag to me, that verbal rushing straight on through, and I was healthy through the next part, and then boom, right on to the next subject. That does raise a little bit of a red flag. That does indicate that perhaps just that urgency to rush through that specific phrase might mean that there's something that needs to be asked there or dwelt on there to find out that perhaps there were more health complications than what she's admitting here. And she's saying that nothing was wrong with her pregnancy except for, and let's hear what the except for is real quick.
In the end, she, like Lionel, has no answers. only questions.
Okay, so that actually didn't answer it at all. That just faded out. So I'm wondering what that except for part that was just faded out in this specific interview segment that I was able to find. So there does seem to be some difficulties in the pregnancy. Lionel insists that there were difficulties. Joyce is saying that the pregnancy was overall normal, but that maybe there were some other health things and things along with that on the back end side of things. This is very curious. Let's continue watching.
Jeff was raised with all the love and care and concern that any child could be raised with, and what happened to him, I don't know. I wish I knew. I'd give anything to know. I asked the universe, why would this be allowed to happen? I don't have an answer for that.
You don't have any answers, do you?
No. No, I don't.
Okay, so that's the end of that video. So in that, I also find it interesting that at the very end, Joyce also insists that Jeffrey was raised with all of this kind, care, compassion, so on and so forth. And we know that that's simply not the case, even from what we've heard from what Lionel depicts, and then also just the fact that with the parents' dynamics themselves, that there are certain things that are always sacrificed in that specific level of conflict in a family. And all of the care and happiness is difficult to give during that level of conflict. From what I'm seeing here, even just looking at it in general, it looks as if both parents are very, very defensive in general of themselves and willing to lash out at the other to more or less maintain some sense of self in this. As far as the effect that this had on Jeffrey Dahmer. So even just in the back and forth that we've seen here between Lionel and Joyce, between the two aspects of specifically the physical health and perhaps mental health in there as well, that they, even after splitting, have had substantial amounts of disagreements and headbutting in that. And to have that sort of turbulence be a source of possible conflict in a home can make it to where it does isolate said child, which we all do know that Dahmer was very isolated in his way of thinking, and even just with how he felt he could express himself. And there are a whole pile of things that go into that. And certainly in this, I don't believe that the Dahmer parents are the ones that are solely at fault for turning Jeffrey into what he did. But I will say that some of the things that they did during Jeffrey's life did not aid him in becoming a healthier version of him, but more so in this secluded, isolated, and twisted version that he ended up developing. Looking at these sorts of instances in these cases, especially when you're able to hear from both parents and understand how they both feel in regards to what has occurred and what their child became when they grew up, it definitely adds complexity to the situation, because chances are, regardless of how messy Joyce and Lionel were, they did not intend on fathering a son who would do what Jeffrey did. That's probably inarguable, I would say. But in that, it still feels as if they are trying to almost shrug their responsibility onto the other rather than shouldering it on their own. But all right, so if you did like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you would like to see more videos, like I said, especially about this case, let me know what you were kind of looking for in the comments of this video. If you would like to be able to head over to Patreon, I am starting a new project here soon on Observe, and we are doing some voting for some charities over there on Patreon. We would like to be able to give all of the income that will be coming from this project directly to the charities that you will be voting for. I will be giving more information on that in a little bit here as soon as I can, but I'm very excited for it, and I hope that you will be able to partake in that as well. If you want to be able to reach out to me, especially if you have any video suggestions or comments, concerns, things like that, go ahead and check out the socials. I do check the comments of the videos here as much as I can. There's just a lot, so the socials are a pretty good place to go. I am across all of that. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Yeah, I'm a social media person, so if you wanted to find me there, that's how. There are links on my About page and things like that. But But without further ado, that's all that I've got for today. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome as you always are, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.